Hey guys, welcome back. JLand Bio here. We are ready to start our very last unit of the school year. Hard to believe that we've made it through 8 units of biology, and we're going to finish up with this one. We got a few other things we're going to wrap up towards the end of the school year, but this is the last big major unit we are going to cover, and it is over ecology. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is here in just a moment, but our very first video is going to talk about how energy flows through an ecosystem. Energy is a finite source in the universe. That is, we cannot create it or destroy it, but it can transfer between different organisms. So we're going to explore a little bit about how that energy transfers, where it goes when it's transferred, and how that impacts food chains and food webs. Our objectives for this video: you should be able to understand how energy flows through different organisms in an ecosystem and how those organisms interact with each other. And then we should also be able to evaluate different levels of organization within the environment. Now, before we begin, it's very clear that this is a very vocab-heavy unit, but a lot of these terms you should already be familiar with. We've talked a lot about some of the stuff like carnivores and herbivores before, but you need to know ecology, ecosystem, biotic factors, producer, heterotroph, herbivore, decomposer, population, biome, abiotic factors, autotroph, food chain, detritivore, trophic level, community, biosphere, and that'll be our word for the video, biosphere, so make sure you write that down. Again, word of the video is biosphere. Sorry, I had to burp at the same time. We'll also look at biodiversity, consumer, carnivore, omnivore, and food web. So what is ecology? Well, ecology is the study of how organisms interact with each other and the environment. You're aware that the ecosystem is very complex, and there's a lot of organisms that live there. We want to be able to study and understand how those organisms interact with one another, whether they're in a relationship, a positive relationship, whether one thing eats another. That really determines how an ecosystem works. Now, the term ecology actually comes from the Greek word oikos, meaning house. How that has to do with the yogurt, I really don't understand, but get the idea in your head that ecology is the study of how organisms interact with each other and its environment. So what is the organization for ecology? Well, we look at it on the smallest possible level. We have an organism. An organism is essentially one living thing. We have a group of the same species, and that gives us a population. So we can have a population of wolves, population of humans, population of cockroaches, etc. Community is a group of interacting populations. So the group of wolves, groups of cats and trees and whatnot, that forms a community. So interacting populations make up a community. We also have an ecosystem, which is the community plus the non-living factors, so things like mountains and soil type and water resources are all part of the ecosystem. And specific different ecosystems make up biomes, so those are major regions of organisms like the rainforest and the desert and the tundra and temperate forests and things like that. And all of those different biomes make up the biosphere. If we break that word down, bio means life and sphere refers to the earth, so the living sphere, the living earth, is the biosphere. Let's talk about some different factors that play a role in an ecosystem. The first thing we have are biotic factors. And biotic factors are living things that exist in an ecosystem. So if we look at the diagram on the right, that's things like organic matter, basically anything that contains carbon. Living things, for example, oysters, blue crabs, zooplankton, phytoplankton, jellyfish, all of those are biotic factors. They're factors in an ecosystem that are living. Now we also have what are known as abiotic factors, and those are the non-living factors in an ecosystem. So things like climate, non-living things like rocks, soil, water, sunlight, temperature, humidity, all those things are abiotic factors because they are non-living. So we have a variety of different types of organisms that exist in an ecosystem. Producers are organisms that make their own energy. Typically, these organisms perform photosynthesis, getting energy from their sunlight to produce glucose and oxygen from carbon dioxide, light, and water. Another term for this is autotroph. Troph means feeding and auto means self, so autotrophs are literally self-feeding. They make their own energy. Consumers, such as us, unless you're a plant watching this video, which I don't think that's the case. Anyways, consumers are organisms that eat other things. So we don't perform photosynthesis, we eat other things, whether it be plants or animals, and that makes us consumers. The other term for that is heterotroph, troph again meaning feeding, and hetero meaning other, so these are organisms that eat other things. So we have a variety of different types of organisms as well. Herbivores only eat plants, carnivores only eat animals, and omnivores eat plants and animals. You break those roots down. Herb refers to plants, carn, the root carn refers to meat, omni refers to everything. A detritivore eats dead and organic matter, and decomposers break down organic matter. So detritivores and decomposers are very, very similar terms. A lot of these you probably have already heard of before, but do keep these in mind. Food chains show feeding relationships between organisms, and each level is known as a trophic level. Now this is really important to understand, is that 10% of the energy gets transferred between each level. 90% of that energy is lost as heat to the environment. So if we go from producer to herbivore, only 10% of the energy that exists within the producer gets passed on to the grasshopper. And then only 10% of the energy that is in the grasshopper moves on to the omnivore, and so on. So you can see how the food chain works here. The food chain can only be so many trophic levels long because we lose so much energy between each step in a feeding relationship. Now, in terms of nutrients, you notice that when an organism dies or decomposes, the nutrients get returned back to the soil, and then the producers utilize those nutrients to grow and live, and then they're eaten by the herbivore again. So nutrients cycle through an ecosystem, but energy only goes up through an ecosystem. Energy cannot go back. Now, most, if not all of the energy that is produced by producers originates from the sun, as most of those organisms perform photosynthesis in order to survive. So we all know that food chains are nice to look at, but not all ecosystems work in a nice, clean chain. That's why there are such things as food webs, which are multiple interacting food chains. So you can see here, you've kind of got a chain here between berries, greenfly, ladybird, dragonfly, frog, snake, buzzard, all of that. But there are different organisms in this that eat different things. So for example, the butterfly will also eat the berries. The titmouse will also eat the berries, as well as the grasshopper, and so on. So keep in mind that food webs are a stronger representation rather than just a food chain. Now, as we mentioned before, we've talked about how only 10% of the energy gets transferred between trophic levels. We use biological pyramids to show relative numbers at each level within a food chain. And this works with energy, numbers, and biomass. Biomass meaning the total amount of living tissue that exists at each level. Remember that only 10% gets transferred up. So if we take a look at the pyramid on the left side here, if 100% of the energy is the energy of producers, only 10% of that energy is transferred to primary consumers. That is the first set of consumers that exists in a food chain. We go up, we have secondary consumers, and that means that 1% of the energy that originated in the producers moves up to the secondary consumer level because it's 10% of 10%. And we move up the chain. So this is why food chains and food webs can only be so many organisms in length. And this works the same way with numbers as well. So for example, we have 10,000 freshwater shrimp. 10,000 freshwater shrimp support 1,000 bleak, which is a type of fish. 1,000 bleak support 100 perch. 100 perch support 10 northern pike, which supports 1 osprey. So the reality is the amount of energy that's required to support 1 osprey is equal to the amount of energy that's in 10,000 freshwater shrimp. It's pretty crazy if you think about it, but that's how the energy flow works in an ecosystem. So do keep in mind that ecology is the study of how organisms interact with each other and the environment. Producers make the food and consumers eat others. There are lots of different types of consumers, and food webs, food chains, and pyramids show how organisms interact with one another. Also keep in mind that just 10% of the energy gets transferred between trophic levels, so a lot is going on with this particular unit. But hopefully we met our student learning objectives for today, and we'll continue working on this as we come back to class in the near future. Hope you have a great day, guys. We will talk to you later. This is Jayland Bio, signing out.